Somewhere in your life, there's probably an animal that trusts you completely. Maybe it's a dog that sleeps at the foot of your bed. Maybe it's a cat that follows you into the bathroom. Maybe it's a horse you've known for years, or a bird that lands on your shoulder without a second thought. Whatever animal it is, it shouldn't exist. Because in the entire history of life on Earth, almost no species has ever agreed to live peacefully alongside another one. Wild animals do not trust. They flee, they fight, they hide. And yet, over the last 15,000 years, humans have somehow convinced dozens of species, wolves, cats, horses, cows, goats, chickens, pigs, camels, parrots, rabbits, to walk into our homes and stay there. We are the only species in the history of the planet that has ever done this. The question of why is one of the strangest in science, and the answer, when you follow it far enough, turns out to be a story about us more than about them. Most people assume domestication happens because humans are clever. The idea is that some ancient person spotted a wolf pup, brought it home, fed it scraps, and slowly trained it over generations to become man's best friend. That story is intuitive. It's also almost entirely wrong. Because if it were that simple, every clever species would have domesticated animals of their own. Chimpanzees are among the smartest creatures alive, and no chimpanzee has ever kept a pet. Neither has any dolphin. Neither has any octopus. Neither has any bird. Only humans. Which means the question isn't really about intelligence, it's about biology. There has to be something specific inside certain animals, and inside us, that makes taming possible in the first place. For most of the 20th century, no one had any idea what that something was. Then, in 1959, a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev decided to find out. Belyaev worked in Novosibirsk, deep in Siberia, at a fur farm where silver foxes were raised for their pelts. Silver foxes are notoriously aggressive. Nothing about them is friendly. They snap, they bite, they scream when handled. Belyaev had a strange hypothesis. He believed that if you selected foxes purely for one behavioral trait, tameness, everything else about them would begin to change on its own. So he began an experiment that has now been running continuously for more than 60 years. Every generation, his team tested each fox pup for tolerance of human contact. The tamest 1% were allowed to breed. The rest were not. Nothing else was selected for. Not appearance, not size, not intelligence, just calmness around people. Within just 8 generations, the foxes began wagging their tails when humans approached. Within 20 generations, they were licking hands, seeking out human company, and whining for attention. But something else was happening at the same time, something no one predicted. The foxes started looking different. Their ears grew floppy. Their coats developed white patches. Their skulls became shorter and rounder. Their tails curled. Their bark changed. Their reproductive cycles began to align themselves closer to those of dogs than wild foxes. Belyaev had selected only for behavior, but the foxes had transformed physically as well. He had accidentally recreated the exact same set of traits found in every domesticated species on Earth. Floppy ears, spotted coats, shorter snouts, smaller teeth, curled tails, perpetually juvenile features. Scientists now call this collection of traits domestication syndrome. And here's the strange part. It shows up in every domesticated species, whether they're related to each other or not. Dogs, cats, cows, pigs, horses, sheep, rabbits, goats, guinea pigs, chickens, ducks, all of them developed the same set of physical and behavioral changes when humans began breeding them for calmness. It cannot be a coincidence, which means there must be a single underlying biological switch that all these animals share, a switch that gets flipped when you select for tameness. In 2014, a team of researchers led by Adam Wilkins proposed exactly that. Their hypothesis pointed to a group of embryonic cells called the neural crest. Neural crest cells form very early in development, then migrate throughout the body, shaping everything from facial bones to ear cartilage to skin pigment to adrenal glands, the same glands that control the fight or flight response. Wilkins argued that when humans select for tameness, they are unknowingly selecting for animals with slightly reduced neural crest activity, which quietly, over generations, produces every other trait of domestication as a side effect. Smaller adrenal glands, weaker fear response, softer facial bones, floppier ears, patchier coats, rounder skulls. One tiny change to how a set of embryonic cells develops, and an entire species slowly becomes friendly without anyone teaching it how. But this brings us to the strangest part of the story, because if domestication is really just a shift in neural crest activity, then something surprising happens when scientists compare modern humans to our extinct relatives. Compared to Neanderthals, modern humans have shorter jaws, smaller teeth, more rounded skulls, weaker brow ridges, smaller adrenal glands, less aggression towards strangers. We have every physical marker of domestication. The evidence is now strong enough that a growing number of researchers, including primatologist Richard Wrangham at Harvard and evolutionary anthropologist Brian Hare at Duke, argue that humans are, quite literally, a self-domesticated species. Somewhere in the last 200,000 years, humans began preferring calmer, more cooperative, less aggressive members of our own tribes. Over hundreds of generations, we selectively bred the intolerance out of ourselves. Our jaws softened, our fear response quieted, our tolerance for strangers grew. We became, in the biological sense, our own first pet. And this is exactly why we can tame animals. Because our species developed the capacity to feel comfortable in the presence of a different creature, without fear, aggression, or hierarchy. And we can extend that same capacity outward. A wolf could not have domesticated us. A chimpanzee could not have adopted a cat. A lion could not have raised a horse. But a self-domesticated human could reach out to any of those species and offer something no other predator on Earth has ever offered. Safety. Anthropologists studying the earliest human relationships with dogs have found evidence that the friendliest wolves may have essentially domesticated themselves too, approaching human camps, tolerating close contact, and slowly evolving into the ancestors of modern dogs. The wolves that were less afraid of humans had more food, better shelter, and eventually more offspring. Over thousands of generations, those wolves stopped being wolves. And the humans who tolerated their presence stopped being wary of another species entering their circle. Two self-domesticating species, meeting in the middle of a long, slow evolutionary corridor, changed each other permanently. That is why your dog sleeps at the foot of your bed. Not because someone trained her, not because you fed her well. Because 40,000 years of biology, working in both directions, made it possible for the two of you to be in the same room without either of you being afraid. Every purring cat in a windowsill, every horse resting its head against a stranger's shoulder, every bird landing calmly on an outstretched arm, all of it is the result of a slow evolutionary conversation between species that agreed, generation by generation, to stop being enemies. And we are only one side of the conversation. The animals in our lives are not merely tame. They are our evolutionary partners.